Fine.
Jeez, you're very intimidating, man. It's only a conversation.
Sorry. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Getting a workout in.
Yeah, it's just kind of cold here, so just kind of do a little pedal and get the heart rate up a little bit.
Sounds good.
Turn this on.
See. How's the volume working for you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, just connecting my AirPods.
It's actually a pretty solid idea, man. Get a workout in while we talk.
Yeah,
It's a solid one, actually. Yeah.
absolutely. Have you seen?
You get a bike or something?
Yeah, Michelle bought a bike for the house.
Okay.
Have you seen? What do you call it? They have like treadmills for your desk now, so they go at like a really really low speed. And you just put it at your like your standing desk, so you're like walking on a treadmill while you work. It's pretty cool.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Initial thoughts are like, what?
Yeah, it's really small. Like it's just but there's no handles. It's just literally the platform. So
Interesting.
it's a good idea. I don't know why my AirPods aren't working now.
Technology, man. It's,
Yep. So how's it going your end?
everything's cool on my end, man. Uh, Nadia's coming along well, and we got a couple of weeks before we kind of, welcome our second edition, I guess. Yeah, Nadia
Yeah,
is
it's February now, so we've only got a few weeks left, haven't you?
about 3-4 weeks is what we're kind of expecting. 3-4 weeks, and Nadia's got really anxious yesterday, and so like she was really positive and really upbeat until yesterday, and then yesterday she kind of just she had like an appointment with the gynecologist, and the gynecologist said the baby is a lot bigger than Zachariah was. So like Zachariah was like 2.7 kilos when he was born, which is tiny, 2.7, and baby right now is like 3 point something in Nadia's belly, and there's still 4 weeks left, or 3-4 weeks left, and
Wow.
so she got really
Maybe early
anxious.
then.
Like, yeah, I don't know. Doctor
No.
says that it's just going to be a big baby, and she's like, I just need to tell you to prepare you. So, yeah, man. I obviously hope Nadia calms down, and like what I've been trying to tell her. But of course, like it's like,
Natural.
what am I gonna say? Like I'm not. But what I've been trying to tell her
Yeah,
is,
it's a
you know,
natural part of the process too, and it's another big change coming, and
yeah.
Human nature to look at get ready for the worst case kind of scenarios in your head,
Well, I guess kind of what Nadia's thoughts are is that she's a small, petite person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's the if it, like how big is he going to be in, how he or she's going to be in. But what I was trying to say is that, look, your body is made for this. Without being condescending, your body is made for this, and so yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see, but that's going on, and yeah, so 3-4 weeks, and we'll see how that goes. In terms of then kind of work and stuff, like you'll love this, man. You'll love this. It's
here we go.
the government is trying to get us back practicing and playing as of next week. But for me, it's mind-boggling. But we've got straight back to competitions, elite competitions. So we're going to be competitive, playing all of Austria. No tapering, so no contact practice, and then small group practice, and none of that stuff we did before. Let's go back, full team practice, and games straight away. No friendly games, no tournaments, no building it back up. But we're still in lockdown for another 2 weeks, and I'm like, well, we're still in lockdown. Schools are closed, but you want us to get back practicing as of next week. It's just, yeah. So it's a little bit interesting in that sense.
It's so strange. All these inconsistencies. I don't know. Maybe it's just a case of semantics that they still use the word lockdown, but not everything is locked down.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think people have a problem with that. Like here, I don't know what it was like for you guys, but here the consensus seemed to be before this time. It was very, very soft, as in, okay, we're closing everything down, but construction is open, schools are open, airport is open. All this, elite athletes, they can train fine.
Yeah,
So in that sense, it was like, well, no, that's not lockdown then. And
right.
just because I'm not an elite athlete or a construction worker, I have to basically like stop my whole life.
Yeah.
And people had a problem with that. So I don't know, maybe they need to change the terminology, or I don't know. What's
Yeah,
the
man.
what do you guys think of? Is it going to be the last one for you? Do you think?
No, I think
No.
especially like at this stage. So we're both kind of in our third lockdown, we say, quote unquote,
Yeah.
because it's not a lockdown like you just highlighted.
Mhm.
Like we still have players traveling. There's Americans coming in. We signed 2 players last week, so there's still that. We know that there's a UK variant. We know that there's a South African variant. We know that there are 2 different variants, and apparently some of the vaccines are working against one but not against the other. Like this is what they're telling us.
Right.
We know that, for example, in Ireland, the lockdown or level 5 restriction has been pushed until March, and for us, it's been pushed until February. In Germany, they've pushed it again later. So even though they said at December, we're going to do this, it's going to be better, and then it got worse. So then, like, we don't know for sure that come February for us, come March for you guys, if it will be pushed back further. We don't know. It might be, especially if there's still these inconsistencies. So here's what we have. Schools are closed because it's not safe to be together in schools, right? But basketball in youth, under 14, under 16, under 19, will resume at an elite level. And we're not playing local, so we're not playing Dublin, but we have to play all of Ireland. So now we got Dublin to Cork, or Dublin to Belfast, or Dublin to, like, how does that make any sense, right? So even if you're not even compartmentalizing it and saying, so if we look at our Bundesliga, our pro team, there's been a lot of cases where teams have canceled or postponed games because they're affected. And because they're pro players, what they do is they get tested every single week. Each one keeps a diary, so like a daily diary, daily check-in symptoms and stuff. And then because they're pro players, it's home, practice, home, practice, essential groceries as well. And they're adults, they can do that.
Yeah.
And I was saying under 14, under 16, 19, well, they're not going to do that. That's not going to be in the realm of their thought. They're going to be like, we're allowed to practice, we can socialize, right? You're not going to tell an under 14, under 16 player, like, what happens if they open schools now? So they're going to practice to school to like. So I think if we do start next week, being completely realistic, I think it's only a matter of 2 weeks. I give it 2 weeks maximum before the first couple of cases come up, because you're restarting basketball in the entire country, and you're saying competitive straight away. So we're really upping the ante. You're going to have injuries. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to have weaker immune systems, and you're going to have the virus. And as soon as that hits,
it's also not just basketball. I assume it's all sports they're talking about trying to do this way, is it?
I don't know. I've only kind of been wrapped up with the basketball because, like, one of the things we're trying to do is if we go back, we're going to have weekly tests. But do you realize how expensive that is? We're talking about 65 players. That's what we're talking about, under 90.
I know it's not like the end of the world, but it's going to have an effect mentally, psychologically, getting a thing shoved up your nose every week. Like,
that's what the parents are. That's what the parents are really concerned about, these invasive tests. But they're also concerned about, well, what happens if the kids go back to school? That means they have to do a test there and a test with you, like. And then we've got some other parents who are like, no, let's do a test every day. And you're like, we are so divided. But now it becomes like almost a club thing where we're talking to parents and giving them advice, and I'm like, we're not doctors. We're not. And maybe that parent actually knows more about this because he's in medicine or he's a psychologist than we do. Like, And obviously there's no clear guidelines from the government saying, yeah, this is the plan, this is what we do. And they're saying, I think it's very vague. I think it's very vague, and
Yeah.
I do think kids coming back to practice is a great idea. I'm up for that. I want that. I think coming back and saying, like, straight away, you cannot practice if you can't play. Like, that's mind-boggling. So you're saying we
Yeah.
can practice if we play. Well, like,
And
not all
can
the
you as
kids.
a club decide not to do that?
Well, we can decide. Well, here's the flip side. We can decide we don't want to take part in this. Great. Our concern, or my concern, really is the kids don't think like us. We'd be making a logical decision based on the health and welfare of the kids. Kids would be like, everybody else is starting. Why aren't we? We're going to switch clubs. So now we lose the kids. Right. So it's like, then for me, it's very, very confusing, because on one side, I really do want to take care of, the health and welfare of the kids. The other side, I'm conscious that in 4 weeks, we're going to expect a child, which means Nadia's immune system is getting weaker and weaker. And then I'm out there in what I consider to be an unsafe environment, because there's no clear plan, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm obviously concerned with this, but the other side, I'm thinking there's going to be injuries. So like for me, it's just very confusing. And then of course, if we don't do anything, our kids are getting demotivated. But my big thing is, right, if we look at our club and say 65 players, I would say 12 of those 65 players are competitive and committed. They play basketball because they want to get better, they want to compete. That means everybody else plays because they want to socialize, they just want to have fun, they want to be recreational.
Yeah.
So the guidelines coming down saying you can only come back if you're an elite player, which means everybody who wants the kids to come back and practice now is going to lie and say we're elite, but we're not. What's it going to do for the kids when we go out to Vienna? We travel 3.5 hours and get smacked by 80 points. What's it going to do for them? Like it doesn't
Yeah.
actually compute and say, yeah, we're glad we came back, and it's not going to compute. It's just
Yeah.
so. But I do understand that I'm thinking about youth players, youth development, and I'm going to assume they're thinking bigger picture, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it all the time. So yeah, that's going on. But let me flip that actually. Let me segue. So
Okay.
Jay Shetty.
Mm.
Let's talk about the first thing which says, keep a journal of complaining, criticizing, complaining, and something else. Like how, like let's listen to what we just started the conversation with.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
So
like a natural thing. It's like this,
like
the first thing we did.
right. And yesterday at dinner, because like obviously it's on the top of my mind because I was thinking about what he said and I knew we were going to have this conversation. I was dinner and like talking to Nadia, and I'm like, no, I'm about to do that. So I was like, Nadia, don't worry, I don't want to say it. And she's like, no, finish your thought. And I'm like, but it's negative, like it's a complaint or a criticism, like, and so like, well, how do you find it? Like, I'm being aware of it, I'm being conscious about it, but
Yeah.
how do you find it?
It's tough. It sneaks in, and yeah, look, I'm getting better at catching myself either while I'm doing it or before I do it, and I can either stop myself doing it as I'm doing it, or I can stop myself doing it in the first place. But it definitely is such a huge part of culture. It's because we have it in common. Like we have this coronavirus lockdown in common, so it's a nice way to start a conversation.
Yeah.
Because we can relate to each other. So I think that's where it comes from. I don't think it comes from a place that we want to complain as such.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's why it's so ingrained in the culture, because we're all just from like the early school age, you latch on to like when a kid, like you wouldn't be a bully, but if a kid was getting made fun of, and because you weren't the kid getting made fun of, you prefer to be on the other side of it, so you kind of maybe not join in to the extent, but you kind of take that stance as well because you fit in.
Yeah, I get you.
So I don't know. It's like a natural response to just go there. Maybe it's easier than trying to make a positive spin on it. But that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to slow it down and
Yeah.
make a choice to either say nothing at all
Yeah.
or to make people aware that it's bad, but what about this? This is good,
Yeah. Like I did an interview there with the club because our press officer decided to do like an interview, catch up with the coach as we're coming in, like we've been on lockdown for so long, and I found myself really thinking about it, trying to turn everything positive. Now, in one sense, that was easy for me because I know I'm speaking in terms of interview to the people that I don't necessarily have in my inner circle, right? So I'm not negative with them, and I don't think I'm negative with you either, but with the people that I find closer in my inner circle, yourself, Nadia, I feel like I'm more open to expressing my thoughts in a way that I know that when you're not judging and you're not thinking that I'm complaining, but at the same time, technically, it is a little bit complaining. And then I found myself thinking, well, with Jay Shetty and how he speaks and how he talks, like where does the devil's advocate argument come in? Because you need that, right? It's planning of like so. Then I started thinking about like what he said is for every time he has a complaint or a criticism, he'll write 10 positive things about, I guess, about that situation. So as to which I get, you obviously got to keep things in perspective. I was just like, it's been on my mind. I'm being aware of it, but it must be so tough.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think I thought about that as well. I was like, you can't just do that. You can't, because that's almost a sense of denial. If something's wrong and you just kind of, turn your back on that, I'm not going to think about that. When it could be a kind of an issue that needs to be addressed. But yes, I think that maybe needs to be split up into two things. Maybe the exercise shouldn't be straight away to go into this super happy denial of it and just list out, well, it's not really denial, but you know what I mean. Maybe it should be to stop and say, is this worth my anxiety and my time now to try and sort this out?
Yeah.
Or would it be better served moving on? And maybe I'll discuss it at another time when I feel a bit better. I think that's probably
because his point kind of going back to the example he gave, especially work and gossip point, for me, I get that. The work and gossip part, I get it, and I don't think we would engage too much in that, kind of making fun or being negative for the sake of bringing somebody down. But like what's really got me is, moments where somebody close to you has done something that upsets you and you really are upset. Like there are things that upsets you and there will be things that upset me. Well, like you can't just ignore it. Then there's obviously these situations where sometimes we want to think out loud and we're not thinking positive. So I guess it's kind of been where, but I got his book as well, the printed one as well.
Cool.
I find it a lot easier to like. The problem with an audiobook I find or a podcast, which when I put it on, I want to do things with my hands because my hands are free, right? And as a result, then I get distracted. So now this is in the background as opposed to being in the foreground. And a lot of the stuff, let's say with his book, I think there are some books that you're like, no, this is deep. This is something I really want to understand a little bit. So by putting it on the foreground for me, hard copy, and then I'm writing down notes and it's easier for me to process. But I guess without listening first to the audiobook, I wouldn't have got the other book. So
that's another thing though I'm noticing. So with that book and the other book I sent you, the Why We Sleep, I was aware of the times that I would say I put my earphones on and I would drift, and I said, okay, I'm gonna listen to music now instead because I'm not ready. I'm not in a good concentrative state here to listen to this properly. Rather than try and force myself to sit still and take it in, I just had to say, okay, not right now.
Okay.
There's no point. You're just going to skip over a whole chapter now and miss it.
Right.
So that's a nice skill I'm developing at the minute.
Okay.
But going back to what you were saying about like someone does something that annoys you, and his his advice is to not explode or not like kind of make a big deal out of it and just forgive and move on, whatever. But my my feeling towards that, how I deal with that now is I feel myself getting annoyed and I turn it back on me and I said, why does that annoy you? Like that's a better question and that's a harder question to answer. But it's like, does it actually annoy you? And then you say, okay, why does it annoy you? And if the reason that it annoys you is something trivial, then it's much easier to weigh up whether you should make a big deal out of it or not.
Yeah, I mean, I get you. To a certain extent, I get you. And this is kind of where we start playing devil's advocate. And are we being negative or not? Are we looking at the worst possible situation? Which I do think there is power in thinking about the worst case situation. But that's just me. Let's take something trivial, right? You're a new homeowner. You've bought a house, and you come home one day, and your neighbor has just kind of left some trash out of the front of their place. It's trivial. It doesn't bother you, right? It's trivial.
Okay.
The next day, there's some other trash. The next day, there's some other trash, and now the trash starts to get into your house. See, this trivial thing can build over time and not be so trivial anymore because you've bought a house and it's well taken care of and you've got your environment set the way you want it to. But there's somebody who is within your environment that is affecting your environment. And sometimes I'll look at it and I'll say, like, that was a house or whatever, but it could be in your actual environment, your house. You come home and let's say for whatever reason, everything's in a mess. It's not the way it's supposed to be. It's trivial. It's happened one time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Well, you could ask yourself, why are you getting annoyed? But I think at the end of the day, when you think about it, you're like, well, you're right within to get annoyed. And I feel like sometimes people like me and you and maybe Jay, I don't know him, but we'll call him Jay, to a certain degree, we're always fixing ourselves. Like, and I find that to be a little bit, it's great because we're growing. But if we're always fixing ourselves, we're saying it's not what we're saying, but the other people around us don't need to fix themselves. It's like, well, Steve will adjust and Nabil will adjust. I don't need to adjust. They will adjust. And I find that to be a little bit tough to deal with sometimes.
Okay, so a couple of things. First, let's come back to the small grievance that you have that builds up over time and it becomes a consistent thing that's much bigger. I think my example of stopping and thinking, is it a trivial thing or not? That thought has to include the ongoing nature of it. So you have to say, if this continued, is it worth it now to nip it in the bud?
Okay.
So the example that you have of your neighbor with the trash, and you can kind of see a trend after a week. It's, oh, this is going to just keep happening.
Yeah.
So you decide, okay, I'm gonna take the hit here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna confront them, and it's going to be awkward, but it'll be for the better. Fine.
Yeah.
But well, first of all let's unpack that a bit. Why did it bother you in the first place? Let's say, well, it's untidy. I take pride in my garden, and I don't want rubbish in my garden. It's going to attract rats. It's unpleasant to look at. It teaches my kids a bad lesson. Fine, all really good reasons to take a stand, I think, and I think reasonable enough that your neighbour will probably kind of say, okay, well, they are good reasons, and I apologize. And it's not just you saying, clean up your shit, But then you go inside, and there's toys all over the place, and the rubbish is taken out, and there's dishes that aren't washed yet. And yeah, maybe it's an ongoing thing, but And that used to bother me, I'll be honest. And I don't think Sinead would have any issue with me kind of saying this, but so the way I cook dinner and the way Sinead cooks dinner is different in that as soon as I'm done with something, I wash it, and it's like by the end of the meal is cooked, it's only the plates that we use are left to wash at the end. But Sinead doesn't do that. Sinead lets it all like build up, eat the meal, and then the whole thing gets washed at the end. That freaks me out. Used to freak me out. But now, like, I'm like, well, it's just the way she does it. It's just her process. It's not. There's no like. Who am I to say her way is time wise it might be, but it's not that big of a deal really because it gets washed. It's not like it's left there overnight. It's just that's the way I did it for so long, and I like to do it, but that's the way she likes to do it. So who am I to say, well, you shouldn't do that because I like it done this way? So I think there's two different examples of one that can build up over time and be a real problem, and one that can build up over time and it's just like I can get over that.
It's a fair point. I mean, I get you. It's really interesting because I'll be the same as yourself. I like things in their place. I like things neat and tidy. I like things clean, right? Um, so when I see something not in the way that I perceive that it needs to be, for sure, I'm like, but yeah, you know, I actually I was thinking this to myself. I feel like I'm the milder version of Ricky Gervais and Bill Burr. Right? They get freaked out. Well, the two of them, right? They get freaked out about the tiniest things, right? And they literally complain about it on stand-up. I'd be the same, man. I'm like, you remember, I could rant about literally anything about somebody crossing the road, full-blown rant. So, um, but yeah, I get you. You make yeah, it's a good kind of example and a good situation. I think
You
it's
know
an
what it is
ongoing
as
like.
well? It's I find I would describe that as a very egotistical uh, behavior that I think well I have advice for you. You should take my advice.
Uh-huh.
When I don't know, is there in that example of the dishes, do you think there's a worthwhile lesson in getting ahead of it and cleaning up as you go?
Um, well, I guess it depends on which kind of way we look at it, but yeah, I think so. I mean, in terms of phew, uh, in terms of being efficient, for one, I think it's definitely more efficient.
By how much?
Um, well, I don't have the calculations, but if we talk about it that way, if you're efficient here and efficient there, well, it adds up
No,
over
no,
time.
just at that time, just the dishes.
Well, I don't know, man. I don't have the calculations,
5 minutes,
but but
10 minutes.
let's say for argument's sake 5 minutes, right? Let's say
Okay.
for argument's sake 5 minutes. But like this is where, like I said, I'll be devil's advocate and I'll go for the worst possible situation, which, like I said, is possibly not a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So I take your point. I mean, but if we're going for an argument, literally, then yeah, I think um, I think mentally or energy wise, it's easier for me, obviously, and for you, for them, for Sinead and maybe Nadia, it's not so much. It's efficient. Me and you,
Yeah.
perhaps it's not so much. So so we take it on board. Yeah, I accept. I think your point about why is my way the right way to do things? Like, who am I to say that? So I take that on board. It's
But
definitely
that,
interesting,
that,
man.
that question there, that could be the argument or the debate instead of the debate of I do it my way and you do it your way, and then we need to decide which one is best. What if the debate was, uh, why do I think my way is better? Maybe they haven't even thought about it. Maybe they haven't even thought about, oh yeah, what if I did clean up as I went along? Then I could sit down straight away after. And that's just the way they did it from when they were kids.
Yeah.
And
Have you had that conversation? Have you had that debate?
No.
Okay.
But maybe if she listens to this recording, I'll have to have that debate. But
yeah.
But yeah, that's what I was saying the other day about like coming from a place of curiosity and love instead of a place of like judging and like wagging your finger. It's like,
yeah, fair point, man.
Yeah.
I think like when we talk about mindset, I think it's very interesting and like challenging to change. Well, not only change somebody else's mindset, to change my own mindset about how we approach something. It's a skill in itself. So
yeah.
But very good. I mean, I will have to sit down and process this, and you know me, man. I'm processing things these days.
Yeah.
Like,
and here's the last point actually on this, and it's something that just came to my head now. What if there is a method to leaving it till the end, and it's that she now gets that 5-10 minutes to herself where it's like, okay, go play with Noah, I'll wash up, and she gets like 5-10 minutes to listen to music and just like calm.
I think if that's the answer, that makes sense. Like for me, that if that's the answer, then there's no debate. That's not a debate.
Like I can definitely see how it may not be her answer right now, but I can definitely see if she picked that trait up from when she was younger, it can definitely be why her mom or her dad did it. It's like, I just need 10 minutes. Go away and I'll wash up. You know?
And I get that. I like there's no argument there. I think that makes perfect sense. And I do think that like in every relationship that you do need your own space and you need to figure out where on earth you can get your own space and time.
So my point there wasn't like with just that specific example. My point was
about everything.
If you step back and ask the question, why did she do it like that? There could be a very good reason for it before you blow your head and say, God damn it, just do it. My way's better.
Just flip the table. It's just, I think that's, we keep talking about it, but like that's the journey that we go through, right? As human beings and as people. And not only do we grow, but we develop and we should be able to try and kind of embrace new ideas and question and be curious about it. But speaking about being curious, right? And this whole mindset, one of the things Jay talks about is reflections and meditations. Are you meditating now, or how's that working for you?
Not in the traditional sense of sitting down and like chanting. Well, sometimes I do. Sometimes I just sit there and listen to a meditation chant for like 20 minutes. Okay. Just enjoy that sort of sensation. But my version of kind of that self-care is maybe some of that like phase 6 flow movement. Maybe some foam rolling, or literally just like lying down or sitting down on the floor with a podcast in my AirPods. Even training for me is a meditation, even though it doesn't seem like it. It's very intense and stuff, but that's the, I'm focused on that thing at that time.
Right. Okay.
And that's meditation to me. But I guess the answer is yes, but in many forms. Not the traditional sit still, think of nothing sort of.
Okay. What about the reflection points? Like when he talks about reflecting and stuff like that, is that something you kind of incorporate in your?
I think I did that. I was somewhat doing that naturally even before I read that book. Like always asking why. Why I sort of pursued this way of doing it, or why did I react like that? That's about the extent of it, though. I'll probably listen to that book again and do some of the exercises he was talking about, because I suppose the better your skill is at that, the better quality of your headspace is going to be. Are you doing that?
Well, I was thinking about it because I've done some sort of reflection process, or like I'd say for the good part of the last 15, 20 years. Um,
Mm.
and it's evolved over time. It's just taken different forms from, well, maybe we started with basketball practice, and then it's like at the end of practice, reflect on what went well, what didn't go well, what do I need to change, and
Yeah.
and then it tapered onto the other elements of my life. And what I found now that I do is at the end of every day, I'll reflect on the day. As part of that reflection, I'll also plan my next day. But I also do like a weekly reflection. So at the end of every week, I kind of reflect on last week, and I also plan my next week. And the same goes for months. So at the end of every month, I'll reflect on the last month and plan my next month. And it is something that I feel kind of helps me, not only in
Yeah.
terms of looking back and saying, well, what went well and what do I need to improve on, but also looking forward and saying, well, these are the things that are coming up, and these are the things that I need to change or be ready for. And so I feel like the reflection part really, really works for me. But I feel like, I mean, if we go in there, I've always liked writing things down. I've always liked having things like visible, written. I've never been a big fan of like when we have a conversation that's different, but just sitting and listening to, like, which is one of the reasons Joe Rogan's podcasts are quite tough, because it's like I'm not involved in that conversation.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
listening on the outside. So for me, that's more difficult. But if I read a book, that's different. There's words in front of me. I can go at my speed. I'm not going at his speed. And so the journaling and the reflection kind of really helps me, because I'm, writing things down and getting my thoughts out. And so, yeah, I find that helps me.
That's good.
In
Yeah.
terms of meditation, again, I've been doing this really for the last 2, maybe 3, 4 years. Since I started at Sky, I think I took it really seriously, because
Oh yeah.
that was about 4 years, I think. Well, they had
They really encouraged that, didn't they? They actually provided
Yeah.
you like, with a Headspace app and all that, didn't they?
Yeah, they provided the subscription for the Headspace app, and there was like a little room for Headspace. And one of the things they were saying is, after a tough call or something, just step away, go get some Headspace and come back. And so I think that kind of gave me the, I guess, momentum to do it. And yeah, I do it regularly. I try and do it minimum once a day, but usually twice a day, morning and evening. It's part of my morning routine, part of my evening routine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if I do it for a specific purpose, like what's the outcome. I do it just to be in that moment and just to calm myself down and stuff. So I don't know if,
Feels nice.
like, yeah, so it's but yeah, I was just wondering about that, because it obviously came up in his book. And really interesting. I mean, I think it's a really interesting book, because he talks about the environment, which I completely agree with. And like, when you talk about an environment, right, this comes across in literally every second book that I've read, in terms of like high performance, in terms of like Barcelona. Why is Barcelona so good? They talk about how the environment is great. Google, why is it so good? They talk about how the environment is great. The book on Outliers. Well, why are these really talented, skillful players coming from these parts? Well, they talk about the environment that's created. And so, yeah, I think the environment makes such a huge deal. Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about how the environment can help you change your behavior. And I think, going back to the first thing, it's like, why do I want my environment in a certain way? Because it can help me be that best version of myself. So, but I really like his thoughts on the environment, and how removing himself from his family environment. I think that's such a tough thing to do, especially with that specific culture.
Yeah.
But putting himself, because I know that, yeah, you get judged as like, I really resonated when he says doctor, pilot, and any other kind of job. So really resonated with that, and removing yourself from that, and like really going against certain norms. But yeah, man, I think when then it comes down to like a 9 to 5 job, and you're sitting around, because Waleed and me were talking about this, right? And I think you probably agree to a certain extent. When you work in an office job, your level of promotion, or your level of wage rise, promotion, or opportunities don't actually come from the work you do. That's this guy. It comes from the engagement and facilitation afterwards. So you go to the bar, you have a couple of drinks, you lose your inhibitions, and then do you connect in a positive way with the person who's superior or not? And they're like, yeah, he's great crack, and and that was one of the things Waleed said happened with his work, where he said and saw certain people getting promoted and moving up the ladder. And talking to a few people who don't drink or who don't go out and socialize, they've kind of expressed that they don't feel like the same opportunities. And I'm thinking, well, that's literally the environment that we talk about, right? So how does somebody in this position almost remove himself from that environment while keeping himself to be able to get those opportunities? And I think that's really tough. But it was some things that kind of, I guess, got the cogs in my head thinking when I came across that part about the environment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. It does come up a lot in every arena, and whether it's to do with sport and how that um, encourages you to develop as a player or not develop, or in like a family culture, like you're saying, education wise, what's around you, you tend to kind of, like I was saying about the bullying at the start, you just tend to gravitate to, okay, that's the normal thing, that's easy. Everyone else do that, so it shouldn't be too hard. So how do you, sorry, one sec.
You're good. You go take your time.
Do that. Sorry. Yeah, so how do you, or when do you decide that I need to remove myself from this environment?
When do you decide to remove yourself from an environment? That's a really interesting one.
How did he, I can't remember in the book how he kind of said, I'm not going to be a lawyer or a doctor. I'm going to be a monk. And
I think it's he talked about it being an ongoing process, and I think seldom do you find yourself in a situation where it's like black or white. Yeah, I think it just builds up. And from what I understood from him, he was that guy who went to bars, and then what he said is that his friend persuaded him to go to this kind of talk in college, and he went and he heard this guy, and he was blown away by this guy. But it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm definitely leaving everything to be a monk. It was then a case that afterwards they talked to the guy, and then I think over 3 years he went every summer to see what this was about in India, and then after, like, he's like, you know what, I'm definitely going to do this full time. So he had that chance to experience that culture during his summertime, and then come back and experience this culture. So then, but and I think not only a question of when do you remove yourself from that culture, right? But it's like, oh, that environment, because the environment creates the culture. It also becomes, for me, and something that I've been thinking a lot about, because like I don't know if we've talked about this before, but somebody asked me a while ago, like, what do I do for a living? And my answer was not, I'm a basketball coach, which is, I guess, my title. But my answer was, I facilitate the creation of high performance environments, right? So, because that's literally what I do. I think, you're creating an environment that is best suited to promoting or producing high performance. Like, that's literally what I do. And I was thinking about that, because if we talk about high performance in whatever aspect, you think about a Formula One car, when it pit stop, like, literally everybody buys into their role. right? So that's part of the job. A high performance environment requires everybody to have a specific role, everybody to know what their role is and to commit to it. So, and when you commit to it, then everything works like clockwork. And if you don't commit to it, that's when you probably have some issues. So I was thinking, like, my job is to build high performance environments, but I also want to do the same thing in my house, right? Why? Because like it will make us a more efficient team. Why do I want to be a more efficient team? Like this is when we start diving into those questions. But I think not only knowing when to remove yourself from the environment, but it's also knowing how do you affect your current environment to be the best it can possibly be. Because regardless if we do it consciously or not, we are facilitating a culture, and that culture is going to be there whether we like it or not. Now we could be consciously creating or changing the environment to promote a high performance culture or a corrosive culture, which is the gossip. So if like I was not Jay Shetty's book, but I can't remember whose book was talking about this cinema in England. So you know they have these no phones, right? Don't call, blah blah blah. But you go to the cinema, everybody is on the phone, texting, doing whatever, and those lights can be disturbing. So that's the environment. It facilitates that. So when you talk about the culture of that cinema, that's what they do. Well, they were talking about the cinema where they had the option of ordering drinks from your seat. But the reason they had that wasn't because of convenience. You order a drink and somebody will bring it. It was so that you could quietly alert the staff to let somebody know somebody's on their phone, right? So that it wasn't you stepping, and then the staff actually did their job and either asked them to leave or, you know, turn the phone off. So that was the cinema really modeling or living up to their standard. And this is the environment we want. And the reason we want this environment is they have their reasons, which make sense. And we're willing to do what it takes to maintain this culture. And I think culture and environment go hand in hand. So it becomes like, well, why do we want certain environments? Well, we do not want an environment in our own personal lives where there's gossip, especially like, right? We want positivity, solutions. And so I think like, why did you remove yourself from an environment, or why did you, like Sky wasn't for me. I felt bad and I felt unsatisfied, unfulfilled, wasted, you know, like all of those things. And you think, well, when I coach, I feel so much better, even though I make so little money. I feel so much better. So you're like, this is what I want. And why did I remove myself from certain groups of friends? Well, there was a lot of gossiping, and I was like, it doesn't serve my purpose. And this is why kind of as we grow, we lose connections. Our best friends are like, okay, we're now part, right? Not because you're a bad person. It's like I want something different, right? And then we build new connections with other people who give us what we want or who emulate the same mentality or mindset that we have. So I guess that process of removing yourself from one environment to another becomes a natural process. And like when you achieve that, I guess you probably want to fight for what you've worked so hard to remove yourself from. Does that make sense? I think
Yeah, it makes
I'm just
sense.
thinking out loud and I could be all over the place.
Yeah. So it's actually quite a nice segue into or like a crossover. Um, so you remove yourself from the people who go out partying at the weekend, and like that's how they find value in their life. And you're not saying, "Oh my God, I feel so sorry for you because you're missing it." You just don't like that. That's not where you get your value from. So you split off. Those people, if they would perceive that as, oh, Nab thinks he's too good for us and he thinks we're bad people or whatever. That's not the case. And that's what I was saying to you the other day about until recently I kind of held back what I wanted to practice through my business, and what I believed to be the actual optimal service I can give. But I was like holding back because I thought it was too extreme, or if people didn't think they could do it, then they would feel like they were isolated, or that I was like telling them to go away. But now I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just like, I have my values and I know that they're values for a reason. And I don't need to water those down or like placate to anybody. If you don't resonate with my values, that's okay. I'm not going to hold any sort of ill will towards you or vice versa. You shouldn't hold any towards me because it's not personal. It's just my values at this particular time don't bounce well off yours. That's okay. You just need, we both probably need to just either talk about that and decide where the middle ground is and we can do it that way, or just go separate ways for now and until maybe we come back to the middle in the future. But I don't know why we obsess over that, obsess over trying to keep as many people as we can close to us by sacrificing what we believe to be intelligent and practical ways to live and be happy.
But I don't know, man, the answer to that. But you know, you're talking about that, and it just reminds me of two different stories. Ronaldinho, Barcelona player, like outstanding player. I don't know if you know this or not. Like this is something I came across recently. I read it recently. Well, eventually, kind of what happened is he, from being this really great person in the team locker room, he started getting into some more partying and stuff like that. And at that time, Messi was, I think, about 16, 17. And they realized that having Ronaldinho in the locker room was, he was being a role model to Messi. And Pep Guardiola at the time wanted, was it Pep? I can't remember which coach it was, but they wanted the environment to be perfect for Messi to blossom and not be influenced. And I think they got rid of Ronaldinho, Deco, and I think somebody else. Not because they didn't have the skills, not because they weren't great people, not like to maintain that amazing environment that they've created, which is why Barcelona are being so successful. They really take care of it. And then the story came of Ibrahimovic, is it Zlatan Ibrahimovic, right? He came into Barcelona, and within a short while, he was like, his skills did not change, and he's really successful in whatever team he plays. Really talented.
Yeah.
But within that environment, they're like, no, it doesn't work out. So it's like, I don't think it's Barcelona should feel bad or Zlatan should feel bad, or you know, the other people on the outside looking in. Of course, we all have our perspective. Oh, what was Barcelona thinking? They got rid of Ronaldinho. They got rid of Ibrahimovic. This guy could have been great. And I think that's the part that people on the outside don't really see or focus on. It's like, well, you know who you are as a person, you know what you're trying to build, you know what you're trying to create, and you're trying to create an environment that not only meets your values, which it should, right? It's your environment. You're trying to create an environment which meets your values, but also that will move you along the direction that you want to go, which again is what I mean by high performance. I don't mean being elite. Let's say if you're creating an environment of trying to take care of people who are just exercising for social reasons. Well, high performance means that they're all performing to the best of their abilities within that, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they become superstars and bodybuilders. It so, of course, you got to remove the weeds and you got to maintain that garden so that what the environment you want it stays the same. And yeah, so I don't know why we sometimes get distracted by that shiny new thing. It's like, do we want? I guess we see, well, he has everything. Chelsea has all those great players. Well, we can do the same. And we miss out that we want the right players here, you know, and well, I'm trying to build something, but I know my pay will suffer if I don't maintain those values. And they're like, okay, I'll put one of my values aside so I can still keep getting paid. And now you're unsatisfied because you know you've sacrificed something that's meaningful to you.
Yeah.
Whereas when you sacrifice the pay, but you hold on to your value, yeah, you still would like the pay, but you're still satisfied that you are staying true to who you are. And I think it's a tough thing, especially when it comes to finances, because we all know how important finances are in our lives. We know how it benefits us. And I think that moment sometimes where we get like, we start thinking about like the fear of what if we lose? What if we lose that opportunity? What if we lose that person? What if we lose whatever? Without being drained by that instead of yeah,
that's a
man,
really
it's
good
a
point.
Damien Hughes from without referencing people, but Damien Hughes in the book The Barcelona Way talks about every decision being made by one of two things. It talks either about the culture, right, your environment, or your identity. Turn this to Jay Shetty, the fear, or your values, right? Your Jay Shetty, does he say values or he says something else? He says four things actually, but right. So you got the fear, like what is everybody else around me in my industry doing? That's the culture, right? So everybody's
Yeah,
accepting anybody. Or your identity, your values, like what do you believe in? So it's
yeah, yeah, really good. That's a really good exercise for people, I think, to do is to, I think, start with the likes of what you were saying about the garden, and it's like your garden. So a really really nice garden doesn't have to mean elite level player playing in the NBA. It could mean you are the best player on your, Tuesday Thursday pickup game, but you're doing everything you can to be like, to continue to improve in that sort of parameter, in that arena. And that's what people I think miss. They think, oh, if I say to myself I want to be a high performance player, they think it's going to involve 2 a day trainings and perfect diet and my family time will go to shit and whatever. That's not what the message is. The message is to accept nothing lower than what you're capable of to make it grow to the best it can grow to. And people don't define that for themselves. They don't define that, like,
yeah,
I wouldn't even say the highest ceiling, I'd say the lowest one. They don't define where they will accept.
right,
Don't go under here.
right,
This is as low as you want to go.
yeah,
Do not accept anything from yourself lower than here. You can go as far as you want, but here
yeah.
you need to define that for yourself and do
And
that.
that's the problem. And that's like, but then we go back to right. That's a problem. We've seen it. We've identified it. Who are we to tell them? Right? We keep coming back to this because who are we to kind of say it? And I've had this conversation recently. Like, so here now with the club, we're really doing a couple of things where I think we're really moving in the right way. I'm really happy with kind of how we're progressing, right? And we're putting in some new kind of projects. We're kind of building. We're identifying, like I said, it's to create an environment for high performance. And we know that not all our kids are going to be professional players. We know that, but that doesn't mean we limit them. High performance is the highest performance or the lowest performance that you're capable of. Obviously, we don't want the lowest, we want the highest. So, and the question that keeps coming back to myself as well, who am I to tell these guys what they can or should do? Like, right? So it keeps coming back. Well, how do I know that they want this? How do I know that they need this? How do I know that, or why should I tell them? Why should I? Because if they haven't identified it, they haven't articulated it, they don't know what they want. Well, who am I? It's that point we come back to. And for that, I don't have an answer. I kind of have a vision. I know, I know what I want, and I know what could be good for them. So that's what I'm doing. It's like, but
Yeah, yeah, that's a hard line to stand on without crossing over either side of it. And I think
yeah,
we talked about this. The last call we had was your job and my job, and I think anybody's job as any sort of a role model, whether you're a coach or not, or a parent or whoever, is just to provide information
yeah,
and options. It's not to say you need to do this or
yeah,
else. Because like you say, or as I said earlier, if they don't want that type of flower in their garden, then
yeah,
don't plant it. But they
right,
have to do that. I can't make them do it, or you can't make them do it. You can provide it.
yeah,
Um, so I don't think in that regard we would be stepping over a boundary of, well, who am I to tell you that? I'm not telling you to you absolutely have to do it. I'm saying I know this will work.
Yeah.
Based on the research I've done, my personal experience, both
Yeah.
on me and with other kids or clients.
Yeah.
So now it's up to you if you want to do your part in that,
Yeah.
and we can bring it all together. But now, I think when you cross that boundary is when you realize that it doesn't work for them, but you continue to like hammer it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So maybe that's the difference there. I don't know.
Interesting point you made about their garden and what they can have, but you have to understand that within them, in their potential garden, they're also in yours, right? So it's really interesting. But
Park then.
I think that's the thing I've kind of realized or made peace with is better, because you kind of realize it, but you don't accept it, I guess. The environment is the most important thing, and the environment that you create facilitates the culture you have, whether you want to accept it or not. And if you allow certain things, I think I said this to you before, I had it up on my, when you permit habits, you promote them, that kind of phrase. So that, I guess, begins to identify the culture you have within your environment. And
yeah, that's huge.
For me, it's all about trying to create that perfect. Again, why perfect? Why me? And I just like, this is where I get the most energy from, and I guess the most peace of mind when I know that things are taken care of and things can bloom without necessarily me being there, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of that, right, the other thing you sent me recently is sleep. Right, so I really want to dive in that with you. One of the things you said is the benefits that they are, right? How many hours of sleep do you get a night?
Typically, I would say on average 7.5.
Like, how do you even average 7.5 is my question. Like, that seems so foreign to me.
This is a great point. So I've known about this very, very vaguely for a long time now, this sleep thing.
Yeah.
Without knowing too much of the research or like this book.
Yeah.
So I was always kind of conscious of, okay, you're taking the piss now, it's time to go to bed.
Yeah.
Whether that was 9 o'clock or whatever, I was like, okay, you need to be up at this time. If you want to get X amount of hours, you need to go now.
Yeah.
My habits were kind of leaning towards that anyway.
Yeah.
Taking steps in the last 2 weeks or so to make that even better. And this is what I'm talking about, conscious choices.
Right.
I made a choice to give up my hour of Netflix when Noah goes to bed.
Uh-huh.
To now taking, maybe it's half an hour, 40 minutes of like the Phase 6 stuff or a podcast or something where my eyes are not getting like bombarded with light and stimulating my brain.
Right.
So now I'm where I used to be in bed by 10, and like beating people then would say to me, geez, that's pretty early. Now it's 9, half 9 at the latest, because I'm up at 5. So,
all right. I get that. You are not only responsible for Noah, but you have another person in your life. Where do you fit them in your time?
Well, right now, because we're in lockdown, it's pretty easy.
Okay.
So I'll admit that I probably will have to be very clever about this when things are back in full swing and I'm working a full day in the gym.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but I can tell you here and now, I will do my best to still be in bed before 10 o'clock.
I mean, that's for me, that's amazing, because I get that. And I generally, so I'm a morning person. I think you know this. I'm a morning person. I'm up at 5. Like, I'm up at 5.
Yeah.
And I love being up at 5 because, like, one, Zach is still sleeping, so I have time to myself. Nadja is still sleeping. I have time to myself to do the things that I need, whatever that might be. And my morning routine takes about 90 minutes anyway, so it's great. I get to do them in peace and quiet. Nadja is an evening person. Like, so what we find very difficult is to balance that, because I'm a morning person. I want to go to bed early. 9, 10 would be great now, especially because we don't have evening practices. Because I know once we start practicing in the evening, I'm only getting back from practice about 10:30, 11. So in those cases, then it's like, because but within, I guess, kind of our daily schedule, I'm like, well, when Zach is in bed, that's the perfect time to kind of spend time. When that, so you're not with your child, you're spending time. And then I'm like, well, of course I got to do this, right? But of course that eats into sleeping time. So I think I sleep 6 hours, man. I think the last time I slept 6.5 or 7 hours, I can't remember.
Well, it's not going to get much better anytime soon if you have another baby on the way.
I know, man. I know that.
Here's a question, right? And this is where I would have asked the same question until I read this book. And it's a question I think a lot of people ask. You actually asked it straight out. It's like, how do you find the time to do all the stuff that you do and still sleep that much? And he makes it really, really clear that it's a misconception that you have less, or you have less time, but it's a misconception that you can't get all that stuff done. And you start to really notice that when you start to sleep better, because you wake up, you don't need half the amount of energy or focus to do the same amount of work. So he says, like, why would you boil water at 50 degrees when you could boil it at 100? So he says, boiling it at 50 degrees will take twice as long. That's you with very little sleep. Boiling at 100 degrees, it's the same job, but you get it done quicker because you have more power, more sleep. So obviously scheduling is one thing. Your practice starts at a certain time, finishes at a certain time. Not much you can do about that. But other things like tasks in the daytime, that might take you, let's say it takes you 90 minutes to do a task from 12 to 1:30. What if you could get that done in an hour instead of an hour and a half? And then you have from 1 p.m. to 2 o'clock to play with Zach or go for a walk with Maddie, where with poor sleep, you don't have that because it's taking you longer to stay focused and get everything firing and do the task properly. So those kind of things, I could definitely see an argument for like taking that time back by being more alert and a better, like a healthier function of your brain.
I mean, like, when you talked about the research, when you talked about just now energy and focus, and I think these are things that I've kind of briefly mentioned about time management and productivity, and so that there are definitely things that I've been conscious about on how do I get more done in less time. If you talk about energy, and I think we talked about this previously about how I try to structure my day to manage my energy. They're interesting, definitely interesting, and it's something I'm interested in because I do kind of see the points, and I don't deny the science behind sleeping. And
yeah,
for me, it's just a case of like,
I didn't do a good job at all there describing the amount of research that this guy cites when he doesn't just say this stuff as in like, oh, this makes sense, I'm going to say that. He says it, and then he backs it up with like a full chapter of a study.
okay.
And he like explains the chemical stuff, and when you hear how mechanisms work,
Yeah.
you just can't deny that, okay, I would be actually better off spending an extra hour in bed instead of sitting at the laptop just forcing myself to type this thing in.
Yeah.
I would actually be better to park it and come back to it when I've had a proper night's sleep. And then that starts to compound because you get 1 or 2 good nights sleep.
Yeah.
It snowballs. You're like an efficiency machine then.
That's the dream, man.
This is one. This is a scary one, especially for people in my field.
Yeah.
People who slept less than 7 hours, even by just one night, ate anywhere between 300 and 1,000 calories extra the next day to make up for it.
Huh.
So their chemistry was like, give me food, and like it wasn't food like, I'm starving, why am I so hungry today? They didn't even know.
Yeah.
that their body wanted it. They just ended up eating that much more. And the rub is, it's not even good food they want. It's salty, processed, sugary, fat food. So it's really easy to just overeat those 1,000 calories without even noticing, just because you slept half an hour or 40 minutes less than you should have. So what did he put it? He was like, if you did that every day, that would be the equivalent of gaining 15 pounds in a year. That doesn't sound like that much, but it sounds a very familiar case, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely does.
Everyone trying to lose 10 or 15 pounds.
It's a fair point. Yeah, it's definitely interesting, man. It's something because when you initially first kind of said it, I put it on my kind of list to discuss with you, because you did have some good points about the ketones, and I looked at some stuff, and obviously now this sleep, I'm going to look at some stuff. I think that's the toughest thing, right? I want to do so much. I told you this before. There's so much that I want to do, and there's no possible way that you can fit all of that in. So it becomes a case of really beginning to prioritize and figure out what are the most important things. Going back to the blog, what are the most important things that we need to do? And one of those things for me was, well, sacrifice sleep to be able to do, so by sacrificing sleep, I was able to spend more time with Zach, spend more time with Nadia, give them the quality time. Because if you kind of go back to the book, the love languages, everybody has, like, Nadia wants quality time. I get that. That's what she needs. And when we're with Zach and he's awake, we don't have that, so I've given up watching movies, dude. Like, I can't believe how much, like, I do miss that. But like you said, you begin to start saying, well, no, I can either watch a movie, I can either sit down in front of Netflix, or give quality time to the person who needs it. So it's like you start making those, and then I'm like, well, I do need my time. I do need my time to just get away from it all. So I'm like, where does all that go? And so for me, the easy answer was take away sleep. But it's interesting. So I'll definitely go back, because
my warning would be the same as Matthew Walker's warning: is that's great, and you're sacrificing your sleep and your movies for other people, and like spending time with your family now. And yeah, it's quality time. You're there. You're present. What if it took 10 years off your life? So what if you're 60 and you have a heart attack, which could have been prevented, the research has shown, by sleeping better now? So I don't know.
Well, your point, this kind of goes back to that whole instant gratification or the short-term effects, rather than that ability to see long-term. Because yeah, for sure, like if we were able to see long-term, then we probably wouldn't smoke, we probably wouldn't drink, we probably would, we'd do things a lot differently. And then obviously then there's a case of this where you're like, okay, there's maybe some things I can change. So
do you think we're aware?
With that, did he cover by any chance? Right. So does 8 hours need to come in one go? Did he cover that, or did he?
Yeah, he covered like sleep cycles.
Right.
So he spoke about, in a certain time, like Dickensian time, whenever that was, whatever 19th century, they would sleep for 4 hours and then get up and socialize for an hour or two, eat some food, and go back for another 4 hours. Okay. And people thought that was, we're naturally supposed to do that. But really what that was, it was just a social thing that caught on. And it was like an environmental thing, like you said earlier, it's cultural. Yeah. Wants to go on the bike.
That's cool.
Hey. Say hi.
What's up, little guy?
Say hi. So then he tied that with the real evidence of circadian rhythms and how that changes from when you're a baby this size to when you're a teenager.
remember when you're like 15, 16, you want to sleep all day.
Hmm.
Apparently, we should be allowed to sleep all day. Then it should be like getting up at 11 a.m. is no big deal. It's what your body's actually telling you to do. It's not laziness. It's not like you just stayed up so late. Your circadian rhythm has changed in that period of time.
Okay.
So the cultural thing of the Dickensian people sleeping for 4 hours, waking up, having food, and then going back to sleep. It was just cultural. It wasn't anything to do with that's how we should do it. So yeah, he said it needs to be like pretty much unbroken.
Oh, interesting. What about the Einsteins and the other Newtons who like took, I don't know, 20-minute power naps and stuff like that? That's not.
He spoke about napping, but one of the things he mentioned a few times was you can't repay a sleep debt by napping in the daytime or sleeping more at the weekend. It doesn't work like a bank. If you miss one, it's gone. So napping does have a benefit, but not in terms of regaining lost sleep. It has benefits of memory and obviously energy during the day. But like, because when you nap, I think you're more likely in REM sleep. So that's memory and learning. So if you're trying to learn something, I think that's what Einstein. There's a story in there about not Einstein, Edison. He used to fall asleep with 2 metal ball bearings in his hand.
Okay.
He would sit on an armchair and just hold his hand on the armrest here. And as soon as he fell asleep and his muscles completely relaxed, so he's in deep sleep, out of REM sleep, his hand would open, the metal balls would fall on the floor, making noise and wake him up. It's like an alarm clock. And he would write down then all the ideas that he had when he was in REM sleep, because that's a really creative time. So napping in that sense, he's definitely a fan of, but it can't repay lost sleep at night.
Interesting stuff, man. Interesting stuff.
Scary stuff.
Yeah. So some analysis and reflection and adjustments needed, I guess.
I need to read it again. There's a lot to take.
And this is what I mean, by the way, when I say about like, I don't know if this is productive or efficient or what, but when I listen to a podcast or when I listen to an audiobook, I feel like I need to go back and listen to it again or read it again. Mm-hmm. And that for me then becomes like, well, why didn't you just do it right the first time? So that's what I mean when I have a book visible in front of me and I've got my notes, then I feel like it might take me longer to actually go through it, because as I'm reading, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I'm writing something down, but then I don't feel like I need to go back over it because I've got the key points kind of processed, I guess, already. But
there's something really cool that he mentioned at the very start of the book. He said, you don't have to read this book from chapter 1 to chapter 20, or whatever it is.
Okay.
So you use this as a reference. So if you have, if you want to go and look, okay, the title of this chapter is what is REM sleep good for? You can just skip right ahead to there. And he said, like, I encourage people to do it that way if they want to just like piece it together that way. So that kind of book,
that's
I could see myself using it more like a textbook than
exactly.
You know. You're back.
How is Noah? And did you guys get an appointment or?
We eventually got a reply from the speech therapist, and she said she wasn't taking anybody else on until February. But I think that was before the extension of lockdown was announced. So we're just kind of in limbo at the minute. So yeah, it's kind of frustrating.
So if you don't want, like, what does he? Can he say any words at the moment?
Not really. He has his own version of certain words that we all know, and he's like, you can see him trying to mimic sounds that we make when he's talking about a certain thing. He's like
Right.
really, really close. Yeah, it's just like that. Proper motor skill formation of his
Right.
mouth seems to be a bit slower.
Okay. And the fact that, for example, we're in lockdown, the fact that maybe people are not taking people, does that have an effect on him in terms of like he needs to see one within the next 6 months, before he turns this age, or is it a case that it's not going to have that much long-term effects?
Yeah, like I wouldn't be panicking over it right now. Like
Okay.
I know, I think cousins of mine had kids that were after 3 until they started speaking properly. So I think it's really easy to get caught up in looking at statistics online and saying, oh, he should
Okay.
be saying these phrases. That language should be, he could be,
Yeah.
you know? So I'm not concerned.
Okay.
Maybe this time next year, if it's still the same case, I'd be a bit concerned. But again,
Okay.
I can't see that happening because you can see him even on his own. He's starting to, you know. Did he? Yeah. Sinead said he just did all the washing up.
Awesome. Teach him early.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see him even now. He's by himself. He's getting better. He's watching the Muppets movie now,
Okay.
and he's like, before a line comes up now, he's watched it that many times. Before Kermit says something, he says it in his
Okay.
own little language. So he's
Okay.
learning how to pick things up, and he understands everything that we tell him to do. So
Okay.
I think it's literally just this motor skill between his brain and his mouth.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
fun and games. But yeah,
Yeah,
hopefully
that's
get there
interesting.
soon.
For sure. We still haven't got Zach watching TV. He's away from screens and stuff, and I think we're happy enough with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've noticed that there's no even desire actually. We've actually taken our TV. We've actually taken it away from the TV. We don't use it much, right? So I've taken it away and put it down here as my second monitor. So
Nice.
so there's no TV in the house. I've got. But yeah, that tells you how often we watch TV. You know how often
Yeah.
we sit down in front of TV.
I've taken a big hit on my TV time lately, like between reading the books and having my time at night time and Sinead is actually doing the same. And she's reading much more now as well, which is nice because even if I'm doing my thing and I'm relaxing or whatever, if the TV is on, I'm still getting it, you know? So it's nice that we're both actually just chilling out, even though it might be separate things. Like she's reading her book,
Yeah.
I might be doing some stretching or whatever.
Yeah.
Still calm, serene, like,
Yeah.
and your brain then gets the signal. Okay, it's night time. It's time to
Yeah.
go down now. So yeah, I think in fairness, I think a lot of people are where in initial lockdown, Netflix and Disney and all these guys took advantage of people being stuck at home. But I think people maybe have had their fill.
Yeah.
To an extent. I hope so anyway. I think they've just kind of, if they haven't fallen like across the other side of it where that's all they do now, they're like, oh, we've watched everything and I'm just watching
Yeah.
again. I would hope that anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, part of my evening routine is actually, doing a little bit of mobility, some stretching, some meditation, but it's reading as well. So, but then what I do is I differentiate the stuff that I read in the morning from the books that would contain knowledge or self-help or self-development to the books in the evening, which is just a novel.
Yeah.
So, I can almost I'm not trying to think actively. I'm not trying to, oh, this is a great idea. It's just a novel. It's just something chill and.
Yeah, that's important.
But I think that's kind of what I mean. I think I have a good morning routine, which is solid to get my day started, and I think I've got this sort of evening routine, which is kind of Nadia hates it because usually we go to bed, right? And my evening routine, I feel like, is so in tune that the minute I get to bed and I lie down in bed, I'm out. Out,
Same.
right? And it's like, well, you can't do that because I'm not asleep. And I'm like, get your evening routine sorted then. Like, what's that got to do with me?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like I'm like, yeah, the minute I hit bed, like, I know it's time to. I'm like, yo, I gotta be efficient. I gotta wake up. I gotta schedule.
Well, schedule here, yeah.
Tell me this before we finish up. You were talking about YouTube, and what's your thoughts? What's your kind of plans there?
What was I saying? Oh, about
Uh,
doing
so
more
you
of
were
this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since I left, I deleted all my social media, and I feel so much freer in my head,
Yeah.
so much clearer. And I think when I explain to people why I left social media in a very short way, it's like I left because there was too much negativity and too many distractions. That wasn't necessarily me saying I was engaged with like a one-to-one negatively. I just mean people are complaining and scared and anxious and narcissistic, and I just can't take that on. But then from another side, and I caught myself doing this loads of times and I just ignored it. But I found myself when I was doing the things that I do, like training or supplementation or whatever, I was so happy about the control I had or proud of how well I look after myself that I would Instagram it. I'd be like, oh, that can go on Instagram, that's useful. And then it became the other way around. I looked for things to make Instagrammable. So my whole, the reason for doing things was like, oh, that would look good on Instagram. I'll do that. I'll do it that way.
Yeah.
And I caught myself one too many times that, okay, that's enough. Like, for one thing, nobody cares. You're not that important. Yeah, you might help the handful of people who follow you. That's great, but there's other ways to do that. But another thing I didn't like was, if you think about this, right, everybody now has this ability to be mediocre, but make it look like they're way above average.
Yeah.
So an example would be, like I was saying, I'd be squatting heavy and I'd be, okay, get someone to video this one because this is going to be a tough set. Maybe a tough set for me, fine. But in the grand scheme of that sort of realm, nothing, baby stuff. So in my head, I'm making myself much more accomplished than I actually am. So it's slow push my own boundaries because I'm constantly bigging myself up with the caption of my, oh, I did a heavy squat today, felt and gonna take a break, where it's not that impressive in the grand scheme of other things. You know what I mean?
I get you.
Yeah. So I didn't like that. So I said, okay, it's time to take all of that negative information that you just recapped in your head and say, are you getting enough positive stuff in terms of business or like positive reaction from what you do? And the answer was no. So gone. So I feel much better now, much more focused, much more productive. Any information that I did get from Instagram, and I got a lot, if I really want information, I'll go look for it. I don't have time. So Joe Rogan is a good source for me. Often that leads me like on a kind of a, what would you say, like a trail. Like I find one person that's interesting. Okay, who did he talk to? Okay, who did he talk to?
Yeah.
You start to find all these like really like reputable people who all talk in the same circle. So that's a way around that. So yeah, I want to start doing more. I want to actually start putting out information that's valuable and not just constantly putting out sort of mediocre little dribs and drabs of small ideas like an Instagram story. I'd like this is much more enjoyable for me. I'm actually really excited to take this and like just put it to people in my WhatsApp group or whatever and see how they react to it. But because I feel this is more authentic.
Yeah.
Like we talked about last time, you can see us sort of stopping and thinking, and maybe even making a mistake or change in direction of the thought or whatever. But you don't do that on Instagram. On Instagram, it's all perfect.
Right,
It's
right,
all like a perfect highlight. It's all produced. So
right.
that's why I like the idea of this sort of honest, open forum sort of thing. And even like if someone hears this and says, "Oh, you misquoted that. You got that wrong. Here's the source." That's great. That's a good
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Then I get to learn. Where I don't know, Instagram, it's like you can kind of choose that. You can write it off as, "Oh, that guy's a keyboard warrior." Where if someone took the time to listen to an hour-long video, they probably do have something
Yeah.
worth listening to, you know?
I think it's really interesting because, you know, it ties back to what we started with, right? Environment. And you just said the environment on Twitter and Instagram was not what you needed, not what you wanted. So you removed yourself from that environment. And it goes back to what we were saying. Like, it didn't happen like that. It was a build up, and you saw that there were certain things going on that you're like, okay, this is not good for me. This is not good for me. This is not what I want. And it got to a certain point that eventually you're like, all right, you know what? I'll step away. And that's kind of like what I mean about the environment. If we can't necessarily change the environment, then what we do is we change our attitude about the environment, or we step away from it. That's kind of, I guess, the concept behind it. Then, yeah, I think, like, for me personally, I really do, like I said, I want to start writing a little bit more. I've kind of reformulated kind of my thought process of how I do things, and I do want to make some videos, but I'm not sure about what kind of videos to make, because I don't want it to be, like you said, the just, you know, non-valuable influencer, I guess, type of stuff that is easy to produce, that attracts, like, there's, I guess, a certain group of people that you'd eventually be trying to attract to your circles, and those are the type of people that would add value. So but yeah, no, it's definitely interesting, and I think what we're going to do is obviously connect a lot more. So every whatever 2-3 weeks, and we see how it goes. But anybody who actually sits through and listens to an hour and a half conversation with us is psychotic, I think. But like, who would do that? But no, it becomes a good kind
What
of
a sad individual.
right. It becomes a good online journal. I think, if anything, it becomes a good online journal for us. And yeah, look, we'll see how it goes. But your idea about you know, breaking down my blog and doing it in video, I think that's something I need to think about. But I guess kind of my thought process is, the blog that I put out, I know it's detailed and deep, but that's kind of the quality I have. I feel like just bringing it down and putting it short leaves out some key pieces of information and doesn't tie everything the way I want to.
That's
but
what
my
I'm saying
challenge is
earlier about diluting your vision. If people can't read that, people can't hang on to that, and they can't either make the decision to say, okay, I'm going to stop here and go back and digest what he said, or if they just don't have, if they have the retention to keep going, or sorry, if they don't have the retention to keep reading and take it in, then that's okay. Like, that's not your job. You put the information out there. It's theirs now. They can do with it whatever they want, and get whatever they want out of it. That's like me saying, that Matthew Walker book, it's too sciencey. You know, that's not his problem. That's my problem.
People say that. People do say that. I get you, though. I get you. But what I might do actually is always put a video and break it down like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good addition.
My biggest problem, though, is having me in front of the camera. You know how I am, and like, just the thought that this is going to go up online for me is like, oh, like, you know. But I guess that's something we got to overcome.
But I think
I might have to.
The more you do it, like, I have no problem. As rough as this is, the lighting is terrible. The sound's probably not great. I'm out of breath. I'm cycling on a bike for the last hour. Who cares?
Yeah. I might have to put some animation on it, man, and straight it. But no,
arms,
yeah, definitely. But no, it's a good start, and let's look.
Episode 1 done.
Episode 1, we'll call it that.
You heard it here first.
I'll put it up online, and then I'll send you the link as well.
Yeah, awesome. Right. Yeah, great.
So say hi to the family for me, man. That's connected.
Man, you too. Talk to you again. Bye bye.